Good morning, this is a short video about technical debt. Technical debt sounds like a horrific thing for a business, but actually it's a very good thing to accumulate, especially if managed. Technical debt in developing a web project or website is everything that you should have done or could have done or there wasn't time to do or couldn't afford to do at some point earlier. The idea is that you might accumulate technical debt in the development of a website and then remediate it later. It's kicking some things down the road, and often for really good reason. Let's talk about what those things are. Examples like infrastructure as code. It's often much quicker to provision the infrastructure that supports your website using manual things or using the AWS console or just pulling it together as you go. Transferring that over to infrastructure as code has all kinds of advantages, not least of all that you can build out new environments whenever needed. You can shift left those environments toward developers, give them a live-like environment. But often these things get delayed, and so that needs remediating later. Documentation. I've often heard the line that the code is self-documenting, which is a wonderful idea, but some level of documentation is absolutely essential. A high-level design that's linked into the code means that when it's extended or developed further in the future, you've got what you need to actually bring new developers up to speed, to introduce it to new people, to help the developers that originally wrote it remember what they wrote, because looking at the piece of code 2 or 3 years down the road can often take a little bit of mining and understanding. APIs may be unformalized, so the different components that make up the system may be working together through undefined interfaces. It could be that the application is developed into a bit of a monolith. That tends to happen, especially because it's quite an expedient way to build an application, but quite difficult to then support it. So taking the time to break that monolith up, formalize it into microservices, have them communicate with well-defined APIs, it's a great mechanism for actually ensuring that the project will be better maintainable in the future. Similarly, there may be few frameworks used, or it may be that the frameworks that have been used have become outdated. Getting those up to date or embedding frameworks, even if it takes a little bit of time for the development team to become familiar with them, can be an incredible advantage, because instead of supporting a lot of code that was originated in your organization that then needs maintaining, that then needs extending in the future, and of course securing, the frameworks will be developed by communities, and so it's bringing more developers on side to help you with the bits of your web service or website that are common to perhaps hundreds or even thousands of businesses. Scalability often gets kicked down the road. When building out a project for the first time, we do it on a small number of servers, but actually there can be technical debt hidden away in the architectural changes needed to bring the site to a place where it can scale, and scale ideally horizontally rather than vertically, so more instances of servers rather than just bigger servers. There can be technical debt hidden in high availability, so it may be that there hasn't been a consideration of failure cases, or it could be that some servers have been developed without redundant backups, or there hasn't been a set of failovers designed for what happens when something goes wrong with that server or instance. Making sure that the service can keep running and keep providing a great service, and that crucially no data is lost, is an essential part of preparing a beta to become a live or production service. Often the tests get left behind. Now, this should be impossible in the world of test-driven development, but we're all human, and so frequently test suites or regression suites haven't had the investment in them that they need to keep them up to date, to keep them useful, and so bringing those up to speed can be really valuable too. Finally, one of the areas where technical debt can accrue is where in the early stages of the project there isn't a focus on getting to production. Instead, what happens is an alpha is developed in an isolated environment with a view that at some point later on the team will productionize it, or worse still, throw it over the wall to some kind of operations team and that they'll productionize it. This can create all kinds of problems, and so rather than kick those down the road, it's worth recognizing that that's being accrued as deliberate technical debt. Ideally, worth avoiding altogether. Get to production as quickly as possible, get to production in the first few weeks, even if what's there is a very basic shell of an application that will develop into a full-fledged alpha or beta or full live service. Why does it accrue? Technical debt isn't a bad thing. It accrues because we can't see into the future. And so there are two ways of approaching that. In order to manage the risk associated with either developing something that isn't useful or developing in an area that we don't yet fully understand, or developing features where we haven't had exposure to the customer and we're not sure exactly how it's going to be used, means that we could, if we speculate, do a lot of redundant development work. We could build parts of the application that later aren't useful. The way to work around that is to build for now, to build in an agile way, to build the skateboard and then the kart and then the car and then the sports car en route, and get close to our customer and to work along those fantastic agile principles, to build a web service that is designed around the person or persons who are going to be using it. That risk management inevitably means that some things need to be kicked down the road, and by doing it very deliberately and managing it as technical debt, it's an incredibly smart way of making sure that we do good development work. Also, sometimes there are features that we just don't use at all, and it's much easier to cut off a feature that's had a couple of days go into it than a feature that perhaps had several weeks go into it because it's been fully productionized and fully scaled. So deliberately accruing technical debt is a fantastic thing. When should it be remediated? Sometimes never. As I say, it's great to be able to throw bits of code away and know that you haven't spent a lot of time on them. Similarly, there are times when the accruing of the technical debt, as long as it's done in an audited way and it's done in a very clear way, can really focus the team's mind about what's important and what it is we're delivering and what it is our customers going to get value out of. Similarly, there are some parts of technical debt where it's the right time is to deal with it right away. I'm a big believer that actually getting exposed to a production environment really early on is crucial because it can steer the way future components are developed. Equally, one occasion when it's good to look at technical debt is when it becomes a blocker. So when we start to see the decisions that were made early on in the project slowing down the development of the team right away, that can be a great time to actually do something about it. What we're trying to do is a balancing act. It's a balance of risk and reward. The two things go hand in hand, and neither is of course bad, only that there's an inherent risk in developing a project, and the reward we hope to get to at the end is contingent upon managing that risk in a really good way. How much of it should we carry? Well, again, it's very hard to dictate a very clear line here. So of course it needs to be done interactively with the development team, with the who I hope will also be running the service, your DevOps team, and trying to understand what impact that technical debt is having on them day to day. There are indicators. If there's too much technical debt in a project, what tends to happen is the rate of progress slows down. If there's too little, the same thing occurs, but for slightly different reasons. When there's too much, it slows down because there is a lot of work that needs to be done to firm up the service, to build this stable platform, and too much moving too quickly earlier on, accruing a lot of technical debt, can make it very, very difficult to actually see how certain problems are going to be solved. They need to be thought through. Similarly, the other end of that is if you're not accruing any technical debt, the dev team will be moving incredibly slowly all the time, and so there can be very little progress, which from a product point of view can throw up its own risks. Those partners who are investing in the product, whether they're echelons of senior management, whether they're an investor in a small company, whether it's your customer through some kind of organic revenue stream, the investor will want to see progress and to understand how the risk that they're taking is being managed. So accruing some technical debt is of course crucial to that. How do we know what we've got? Well, with any web project, the best way to understand the technical debt is to put it through some kind of process. We offer one at Litena. Equally, we offer a free web audit toolkit that's available on our website. There's a link here if you'd like to take a look at that. There's a load of questions that you can ask yourself, your product team, your development team, to work out where the project is. Essentially, the process is about understanding what's going on behind the curtain. Any horror movie director will always tell you that it's far scarier to not show an audience something. So with technical debt, the process that I'd really advocate is taking a look at what's there and understanding when in your timeline it's going to be developed. By leaving it to later on, it's the best thing for the product so long as it gets remediated. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any comments or queries, please let me know.